Yeah.
I'm worried that people who look like me are moving out of the core of Atlanta, Auburn Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
I love the fact that there's diversity in other people.
And I just want to say thank you.
You're welcome.
I appreciate you so much.
My mother was clean the Rialto, you know where the Rialto Theater is located? Yes. My mother that was her night job. She worked for $5 a day cleaning white people's houses during, and at night, after the theaters would close, she would clean the balcony of the Rialto Theater.
Oh, wow.
The men, black men cleaned the floor with a big blower. But if you cleaned the balcony, you had to clean it with a little brush. So in order to help her, and so she wouldn't have to ride home on the bus late at night. If I was on a date, I'd have my date drop me off there. Sometimes they wait and give us a ride home. One guy asked me one night, well, why are you going into the theater this time of the night? I said, well, my mother works upstairs cleaning the balcony, and he waited for us to get out. But I
you had the nicest day. That's not the only day story that I know.
We would clean and brush from under the seat. You can't pay me to throw a chewing gum wrapper on the floor.
Yeah.
I mean, we would be up there on our knees cleaning from under the seats, and the things you learn that help you in your life, help you have regard for other people and spaces, I learned, and my mother worked there, and that was a good experience for me. Sometimes, I know I've always had people sometimes ask me, you know, help me find my son a good job, or help me find my daughter a good job. I said, they don't need a good job. They need a job that will teach them about people who do those kinds of jobs and how those people feel.
Right.
Because it helps you have regard for people who work at all kinds of jobs and live in all walks of life.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot sweeping those floors with my mother in the Rialto Theater. So when I go there, now that Georgia State owns it, people say, how do you know your way around this place? I said, oh, I used to work in cleaning the balcony.
Right.
This is what my mother did.
So a long history, deep history with Atlanta. Yeah.
Good working folk.
So my first question is, you've been a member of Ebenezer, which is right here, since you were 10 years old. And it was really interesting as I was reading your bio, how you describe your time at Ebenezer since you were 10 as like social justice, religious, and political education, right? And not just like a church, you know, that you go to. And so I found that really interesting because I think, you know, that gave me insight into how you all saw church and what church represented for you and your community at that time. I mean, and then also you were under Martin Luther King Sr. and then Martin Luther King Jr. So not bad people to be under the tutelage of. So this was like a legitimate educational institution in the communities, right?
The first time I heard the word vote, I was sitting in church at Ebenezer.
Yeah.
I wasn't old enough to vote. I didn't know what voting was, but I knew when I got to be 18 I was going to vote because Daddy King said that was the way you could have a voice. Mm-hmm. You had to vote.
Yeah.
I don't want to interact with people who don't vote.
Right.
To this day. And
To this day.
I have a friend of mine. She's got a doctorate and she was talking about the dilemma who to vote for. I'm like, I don't want to vote for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
But she didn't like anybody. I said, let me make this very clear to you. I don't care who runs against him. If you don't vote for him, don't talk to me anymore. We're not friends anymore. That's the end of this. Let's get this straight. I mean, I just said, you know, let's make this very clear. We got to get him out of there.
Yeah. So
I'm serious about voting.
I mean, yes, as we all should be. And I think that, you know, you told me a little bit about the stand up and speak out. And that's like what you learned to be a fighter from church, right? So talk to me a little bit about the importance of that and the black church and what it represented for the community. Because now, like, you know, I think churches represent a little something different for our generation. I think they represent, you know, kind of a nostalgia or something you did as a child or, something that you have a connection to, and even if you're religious or spiritual, I think it's just very different, from when there was segregation and people were going to church to actually just learn and like really, grow and cultivate a culture. So can you talk to us about that?
I heard by way of the grapevine that the black ministers, black clergy had a meeting in Atlanta, and they were discussing the different types of ministers, because it seems that they were clearly divided into two parts. Some people had basically a religious purpose at their church.
Right.
Others had a social justice ministry. I thought that was strange.
Oh, wow.
Because I grew up at a time at Ebenezer when if you didn't go to church on Sunday at Liberty, Big Bethel, Ebenezer, or Wheat Street, you didn't know what was going on in terms of social justice in the community. Because at the end of every sermon, they told you what was going on, what had happened, and you had.
It was like a news
hour. Absolutely.
Really?
Afterwards, no matter what the topic of the sermon was, at the end of the sermon, they said, "Let's tell you what's going on now." Wow. Emmett Till was the Trayvon Martin of my time.
Right.
Emmett Till. And of course, we grew up with the newspapers showing pictures of Negroes who had been lynched, and people standing around smoking cigarettes and drinking and talking while this image of a person was hanging from the tree. And I remembered Martin Luther King saying, "You folks sitting out there with your mouths closed, not doing anything, talking about how bad the people were who did this, but look at the people who stood silently, watched, and did nothing." Mm-hmm. Right. You've got to stand up and speak out. You cannot be silent. You've got to be in the game by expressing your distaste and dislike for these kinds of things.
Right.
You've got to have a voice.
Right.
And so I grew up listening to that every Sunday. And we would talk about it in school. If you didn't go to church down on Auburn Avenue, around Auburn Avenue, I don't know what they did on the west side.
Right. Right. So like, what was it? That's what I was gonna say.
Get the information.
Yeah, and I was saying, like, how was that going to? I mean, for all intents and purposes, Ebenezer was like the church at that time, right? You had both.
We had
kings,
both.
Right? Like,
we said they were competitors, and I tell you
the dad and the son.
Oh no, the competitors were Reverend Borders and Reverend King.
Okay.
We figured out as children that they were kind of competing against each other for whatever reason, and it's so funny. We listened to what he told us, and that was a church. It's so interesting. That was a church. There was a store right across the street from our church, owned by some Jewish people. Yeah. That was always open on Sunday, right on the corner where the new church is located. Reverend King told us, "Don't go over there and spend our money," because he wanted us. We go over there and buy pickles and candy and stuff like that. He wanted us to put our money in church. And so he couldn't stop us from going over there. So he told the man not to open on Sunday. Well, first of all, he placed some deacons over there. Now, being smart children, we just wait until time to take up the collection. They'd be in the church, and we'd run over there and buy it. So he stood up in the pulpit one Sunday and pounded his fist on the podium and said, "I'm going to shut him down." I never shall forget it. So he just told everybody in the community, don't shop there. It was my first experience with really seeing how effective a silent boycott could be. The store was closed because the man wouldn't keep it closed on Sunday. And of course, we owned the property. I mean, you grow up in that environment where you see. We didn't even say a word, just spread the word. Nobody is to shop in that store. And nobody, and of course, all of the ministers in the neighborhood told their members, don't go there. Right. Couldn't make any money. Closed down. I don't know when we bought the property. Right. But we owned it. But we would defy him. Yeah. And if he did something we didn't like, we would do what he told us to do. We would mobilize. Yeah. And what we would do on Sunday, we'd go to Sunday school at Wheat Street. He'd get up in the pulpit the next Sunday.
Was it better, the Sunday school?
It was about the same, because they would do the same thing. If Reverend Borders made them mad, we had to be in Sunday school.
Oh, okay.
They would come to Sunday school with us. Our parents couldn't say we weren't in Sunday school. Right. They would say, yes, I know you children were in in church and Sunday school down at Wheat Street. So we would do to him what he told us, withdraw.
Right. Take away. A little silent blackout. Right.
He couldn't do anything but be proud of us because we would do the same thing to him that he asked us to do to other people.
Right.
So we learned very well what it meant to stick together and get things done in a very pleasant way. You don't argue, just take your services somewhere else.
Right. And you still do that today.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. So let's talk about segregation and then integration, right? Because I think it's also something that we need to talk about more, and it's something that can be easily forgotten if it's not discussed, because we're in an era where it's we want to be harmonious. I think it's important that we're together, but there's also the fact of Atlanta and a lot of cities and states in the South were segregated, very much so, and so you lived through some of that. And then I'm particularly interested in when segregation was going on, and then it translated or transferred to integration. Like, what was that like? So some people have said that integration was one of the downfalls of being able to have Black power like that, being able to take all, unite and take all of your services or your money or something somewhere else, because we're at other parts of the city and people live in Buckett, people live in wherever, and they, live in other areas, and so that power is now decentralized. So I forget how present segregation was, and so we know about buses, we know about that, but what else couldn't happen during the segregation time?
We couldn't have the current editions of books. I remember getting books that already had Bass High School and Grady High School stamped in them.
Yeah.
And we got those books. We would tease each other because they'd have their names written in them. We liked to get certain students' books because certain students white students took better care of their books than others.
Oh, so you would get Sally's book from before and you wanted Sally's again.
Right.
Okay.
And our teachers would get the current editions of the books.
Right.
And tell us what was missing and give us the updates. And so we weren't left behind.
Right.
In any sense of the word. That I remembered very much, and the fact that we didn't drive on certain streets, we didn't walk on certain streets in Atlanta.
Imagine, and I want to let that sink in a little bit, because look at where I cannot. If someone told me I couldn't walk on a certain street now because it was a white street,
right, to keep you safe, because the students there might attack you. I thought about that when they showed the attack of this fraternity student by these people because he was walking past the fraternity. It was on television recently.
Oh, wow.
He was walking past this fraternity house and the people attacked him. He's now suing them. But our parents would tell us certain things that would keep us safe. You see, if you were walking over by Bass High School or Grady High School, you weren't shopping over there. You didn't live over there. They would assume you were there to steal, and they might arrest you. If you happened to drive through there was nothing that said you couldn't drive through there, but our parents would tell us don't drive over there. You might have a flat tire. You're over there knocking on somebody's door. They might think you want to steal something. So they would tell you don't drive. So even if it took you longer, you drove around the neighborhoods that were occupied by white people. Now, it was against the law for whites and blacks to live on the same street in Georgia. That's why if you're driving in Atlanta, that's why you had Mitchell Street downtown Atlanta.
Yeah.
When you got to Northside Drive, the name of the street changed to Hunter Street.
Right.
That's where Marsh Brown was. When you drove
Then
down Hunter
black.
Street, past Washington High School, you got to Mosley Drive. That's where white people live. The name of the street changed to Mosley Drive.
Got it.
That's why that existed in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And blacks and whites knew where whites and blacks lived because whites and blacks didn't live on the same street. So that was very clear. You learned it because your parents taught it to you.
Yeah.
And you had to understand it to keep yourself safe. You had no business over in Piedmont Park because they didn't let blacks go over there unless you had some job over there. They didn't admit you, so
Yeah.
why are you over here?
Yeah.
So you didn't go over there, you didn't drive down that street.
Yeah.
If you happened to be with someone who had a car.
Yeah.
And so you were restricted,
Yeah.
but it's amazing what, I didn't have a white teacher till I got to Spelman.
Right.
It's amazing what those teachers did
Mm-hmm.
to fortify your belief that you were an okay person, you were a beautiful person.
The black teachers?
Yes.
Yeah.
You had just as much ability as anyone else.
Yeah.
I went to Charles Meredith's funeral, and it was very interesting because one of the things they talked about, he became chancellor of the Atlanta University Center, and he died recently. He was educated in a community out near Turner High School. His elementary education was in a school that had an outhouse, a potbelly stove, and only 4 grades. He went to Morehouse at the age of 15. But they did a lot of teaching. You know, you only have 4 grades in this school, but we're going to teach you
Yeah.
enough to get you into high school.
Right.
People were teaching and working and whatever.
That's incredible.
It only had 4 grades.
Yeah.
But and the man who spoke about that said that they all laughed and said he was so smart because they just decided as children, he was one of his friends, that he was smarter than everybody else because his house was closer to the school. But it was amazing what we knew when we got
Yeah.
to college, that there were no voids
Yeah.
because the teachers knew what we should have been taught, and they
Right.
made sure
Right.
we learned that. I don't know if some of that is lost. Teachers took you home if you didn't have,
Mm-hmm.
you know, now we're afraid to put students in our cars and
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah.
Afraid we'll be accused of
And
things.
students respected teachers a lot, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Which is not.
The church, the school, the Butler Street YMCA were
Uh-huh.
safe havens. That's where you went. Your world was a little smaller than
Yeah.
it is now, a
Yeah.
lot smaller.
Yeah.
But the deprivation educationally was not there because the Negro teachers tried to make sure you knew what was required.
Now, did people respect substitutes back then? Because now they get no one. So like,
In my life, I don't remember a substitute teacher.
really?
I don't ever remember having a substitute. I graduated from John Hope Elementary School on the
Right.
street and went to Howard High School. John Hope went from kindergarten to 7th grade. Then you went to high school 8th through 12th.
Yeah.
And I don't remember ever having a substitute teacher. It was the strangest thing when I think about that.
So when I first came back to Atlanta, I subbed for like 2 months or something like that.
And they
That's all I
put
could
you
like.
up.
I had people climb out the window, like when I was teaching class, and then like climb out the window, be outside on the phone. I was like, wait, what? So that's why I'm like, were people doing this to subs back then?
Having a substitute teacher, we were discussing that because the Howard High School group has an annual breakfast.
Yeah.
And we were getting together recently talking about things and preparing for that.
Mhm.
We were talking about, we called them supply teachers. We didn't remember having any supply teachers
Really?
in those days. Not one ever.
Huh.
It's interesting.
Superhuman. So then, okay, so there was segregation, then integration, but was it just like, you can go where white people can go now? Like,
Well,
what
I
was
was in
that?
college when they started desegregating
Yeah.
schools.
Yeah,
And so I listened to people tell me, and I knew some parents who had students,
right,
who they actually took the best, they just didn't let everybody go. So I was told they
right,
took the good students who were capable and had them transferred to the white schools because they didn't want to give a bad impression
right,
that we couldn't be competitive.
right,
I was
right,
told that happened. I
Right.
have no proof that
Right.
that was
right. And then you could go in Piedmont Park, you could go to these places then, and you just kind of started slowly going?
Yes.
Yeah.
Some of the students
Some of the
would
dates.
absolutely go.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And it was very interesting. We had to struggle to make sure that our parks, recreational facilities that were in predominantly black areas
Yeah,
didn't go lacking.
right,
Now that people were showing preferences to other places,
right,
we had to really make sure they were taken care of.
right,
Because they they were just as good because the white people weren't pouring into our community.
Of course not.
As we were pouring into theirs.
Right.
And so we wanted to make sure the resources were still equitably distributed.
Right.
That was interesting.
Yeah, I think that's and we talked a little bit about what happened in Grant Park. I think you told me Mosley Park or Grant Park had the
Park.
yeah.
I told him there is a swimming pool in Grant Park in the southwestmost corner. It was there, and whites would go there and watch the animals and swim there. But when they desegregated the recreational facilities, they brought in bulldozers and dumped dirt in it. But if you dig, I said, well, are they going to take it apart? No, they just took down the diving board and everything, just dumped dirt and covered it up.
And called it a day.
That's right. To make sure that you might go to that park, but you are not going to swim. There would not be blacks, Negroes, and white people swimming in Grant Park together, but a swimming pool is underground in that corner.
Wow.
In the southwestmost corner, right there. I remember where it was. We used to drive by and see it.
So that's really interesting. I think because I feel like, as integration happened, people were probably like tipping in, like, you trying to go to Piedmont Park? Like, I don't know. But I think it was, I just want to, that's really interesting to me because I can't even fathom not being able to go in a place like that and being shut out or being looked at oddly or something like that. So that's pretty interesting. And you mentioned about your college years. So now when you've done high school, it was segregated. You moved to college, desegregation began to happen, and you were at Spelman, and you were actively involved in the student movement. Super active. And then I also want to give a shout out to Dr. Herschel Challenor. She was our first guest of the year. So thank you for being here. They are actually old friends, and we're actually friends in college that participated. No, they are not old friends. They are established friends. Long-standing friends. And yes, long-standing friends. And they were actually participated in the Atlanta student movement together. Were you all jailed together, arrested and jailed together?
I was not in jail with Herschel, no.
No, she was smart. She was jailed with
Otis Moss.
Yeah, Otis Moss.
Yeah, Otis and I were in jail. He was in
I was
charge
in the
of
Atlanta City Jail, and you were in a county jail?
I was in city jail I was arrested at the state capitol.
Okay, right. And where were you arrested, Dr. Challenor?
It was like a five and dime store called Newberry.
Oh, right. Okay, Newberry, yeah. And so there are certain people who really participated in the Atlanta student movement and really helped drive it. And two of them are here with us today. We also interviewed Mr. Charles Black, who was a friend of both of these ladies, and he was really active as well in the student movement. And Dr. Challenor told me that Dr. Middlebrooks is actually the best person to talk about this because you were super active. You said 3 years, right? 3?
After a year, we left.
Right.
I was on a panel with Charles Black, and Charles and I differed. So I said, that didn't happen, Charles. Well, let me tell you what happened. When we divided into groups that morning to sit in.
Right.
And you have to understand the time. A man was in charge of each group. And they want to say, male chauvinism, they didn't want women to be in charge. That wasn't the point. During that day and time, people want to say Martin Luther King was chauvinistic.
Yeah.
But during that period of time, it was wonderful. It was a star in the middle of your forehead. If you were a man and you had a wife and she didn't have to work. And so men were put in charge of things, and because they were there to protect the women, to open the doors for them, and all these kinds of things. And so this was it wasn't that they thought less of us. They respected us and wanted to make sure we were safe. So he and I differed because the idea came up, who was in charge of each of the groups that went to the different places to sit in. And Newberry's and the different places. Well, a male was, and Otis Moss was in charge of our group, and we didn't question it. Well, they were there to protect us. In fact, we decided that if they lined us up to get in police cars, we were to line up a male, a female, a male, a female. That was to make sure no female was in a car with police alone, because they weren't going to ride one person to arrest them per car. And when I got in the police car outside of the state capitol, I sensed someone was getting in behind me. It just happened to be Otis Moss. It just happened that way.
Yeah.
But that was the men's way of protecting us and respecting the women.
Yeah.
Not that they thought we weren't capable.
Yeah.
So he and I differed on that, because he was saying, oh, there were some women in charge. I said, there were not. There we were in front of the people different.
Right. Which is
Not
good.
true.
So like, how did you get involved in the student movement? And then if someone didn't get involved, like, how did you look at them?
Oh, it was all right. We expected some people
Yeah.
to not go the
Yeah.
first day or the second day, to take a wait and see
Right.
attitude. And remember, we believe people had a right to their own feelings and
Right.
expressions.
Okay.
We weren't trying to force our feelings on people. So we respected free speech rights and attitudes. I was on my way to Spelman's campus and ran into Lonnie King.
Yeah.
Now I knew Lonnie.
Do we
from
know
the
who Lonnie
8th
King
grade.
is? Okay, so Lonnie King, keep me honest, was the leader of the Atlanta student movement.
He and Julian Bond.
Yeah, he and Julian Bond. He
Right.
was one of the leaders of the Atlanta student movement, a native Atlantan, and he recently passed away. Actually, when I interviewed Dr. Challoner, I think he had passed away just right before that.
I thought it was after.
Yeah, I think it was, yeah. Oh, yes, it was afterwards. It was when I chatted with Mr. Black, because he just went to the funeral. Yeah, so anyway, I'm sorry. I just wanted to give a little tidbit. He's very important. Yeah.
Well, Lonnie and I met when I was in 8th grade, because he was in the 12th grade, and I reminded him that he was old.
Right.
He was in the 12th grade. I was in the 8th grade.
Right.
And he was a member of Ebenezer, but I didn't pay too much attention to him. But he and Vernon Jordan were running for president of the student body
Right.
at David T. Howard High School. And Lonnie beat him. He never let Vernon forget that.
And Vernon Jordan is another very important gentleman.
Very
that we should know
important
about.
gentleman.
Yeah.
Vernon actually lived on East Avenue across the street from me. He
Okay.
was a senior at David T. Howard when I went there in 8th grade. Now Lonnie was very smart.
Right.
And Lonnie decided he was going to campaign and try to get the vote of the 8th graders. Now, you know, 8th graders, largest class in the high school, 8th graders, very smart. So he gave us lollipops and stuff, and we liked it. So we all voted for him, and he beat Vernon. Now I get to college, and I meet him on the campus, and I had been seeing him at church. His mother went to Ebenezer, and he asked me if I would knock on the doors of the different dormitories on Spelman campus. It was half the size that it is now. We only had about 350 students or something like that. So it wasn't a big job, maybe 4 or 5 dormitories. And asked the young ladies if they would come to sit in with us the next day.
Yeah.
So I said, sure. So that was my job the night before. I was so happy. Some people said no. Some people said yes. Some people said maybe. I did the next morning when time to go over. And don't ask me what time we were supposed to be there. I couldn't remember. I tried to remember. But I was so glad to see some of them coming behind us.
Right.
And so that was my job, and that's how I got involved. And I had no idea where I would be going for the city, and they didn't tell us. We didn't have cell phones in those days, but someone did alert the presidents and people, and they had said they were going to put students, they weren't out, they were not going to excuse anybody from class. So
Yeah.
I must say I made a concerted effort to knock on the door of every student that I thought was an exceptional student.
Yeah.
Because I figured they weren't going to put smart young ladies out.
Right.
And it was really, really, really very gratifying. So that was what I did. That's how I got involved.
And did you look at the people who weren't involved? Were you like, do you look at them like, do you still know some of the people who weren't involved that you asked, and how do you feel about them?
Fine, that's all right. And some of them who weren't
I'd be
involved
like-
say they were.
Right. You'd be like, nah, you weren't involved.
It's all right, you know, people get amnesia and they
Right.
start telling me things they did, and I say, I didn't really see them. It's all right. But
Right.
there were a lot of people who did a lot of different things.
Right.
And we were really
Yeah.
thankful.
Were you
for the
considered a
numbers.
rebel? Was it a rebel thing, or was it like everybody's doing it? Like what?
No, I think they were very proud of us.
Okay.
Listen, when we were in that jail cell that day, and the people from the community came to bail us out, they were so proud of us.
Yeah.
They really were proud. And the prisoners who were there were happy to see us. They were like, yeah, you know.
Right.
You didn't know what was going to happen, but they were very welcoming and very pleased because we were doing some things that people couldn't do. So it was scary at first, but then it was numbers make it really comfortable.
Right.
Now, all of us, I was in a holding cell.
Right.
I actually didn't go back to a cell that first day.
Were you in a cell or a holding cell, or was it did you go back to the jail?
We never left the jail.
Yeah.
No, I mean, we were arrested, and some people were released on their own recognizance.
Got it.
But those of us who had decided we were prepared to stay in jail, stayed in jail.
Okay. For days?
It was about 5 days.
Yeah.
And we would have stayed longer.
5 days? Oh, okay. That's a time.
Excuse me, but when this gets involved in national politics,
Right.
because Kennedy was running,
Got it.
and his brother called the mayor of Atlanta,
Yeah.
and said, you probably know this story better than I do. It said to release the students.
Right.
And
Right.
so we
Yeah, I've heard
came out,
about that
we
story.
realized that it was a sham.
Mm-hmm.
And so we began demonstrating again and went back to jail. It was what, February?
Right.
Hmm.
That's right.
Okay. So.
And some
Yeah.
people who didn't go the first day, well, one thing that was very helpful, we weren't brutalized in any way. And so
Right.
a lot of people took a wait and see attitude. And after they realized we weren't hurt, then they joined us, which was good. It was all right, because if you weren't ready to go the first day and be roughed up,
Right.
you shouldn't have gone, because we wanted everything to be peaceful.
Right.
And the mayor, thank goodness, wanted everything to be peaceful. So they were trying to keep everything, quiet.
Right. So we have a first day. Y'all are first dayers.
We all.
We have first day, then we have a second day tier,
The other days, because
and then others.
every time we'd leave, they'd open the restaurants again.
Got it.
One day was particularly was stressful for the community.
Right.
It was going to be a Saturday, and I don't remember the date, coming close to Christmas. And the
Yeah.
Klansmen had announced they were going to be downtown. We were picketing Ridges. And you have to understand there were no malls at that time.
Is this the famous picture? The picture that I like?
I don't know what day that was.
Oh, okay.
But
Okay.
we were picketing, it was at Ridges.
Uh-huh.
We were downtown.
Have you all seen this really cool picture? Did
Yes.
anybody? Do you know the picture I'm talking
Yes,
about?
I do.
So there. I'm sorry to interrupt your story. I just want. Tell your story and then I'll talk about it.
Well, we were going to be downtown, and the Klansmen said
Yeah.
they were going to be downtown. Now, remember, every day we picketed. Some people crossed the picket lines and went into the stores. But they announced that the Klansmen had decided they were going to picket too. So people were pleading with us to not picket.
Yeah.
And we decided, no, we're going to keep our regular routine. We'll be there. So we were walking clockwise around Ridges, and they were walking counterclockwise. Now we had been trained. We had gone through training sessions. You're not supposed to retaliate. Somebody spits on you, and
Right.
if anybody's yelling at you, obscenities or what have you, keep your head turned in the opposite direction.
Right.
Don't show any emotion.
Right.
I'm picketing, and this old white man is walking toward me. He looked like, at that time, I was about 21. He looked like he was about my age now. He was on a caddy. And he was walking. As he got closer and closer to me, he was yelling obscenities and raising this cane.
Wow.
And I'm telling you, in my mind, I was saying, are you going to let him hit you? Are you going to let him hit you? Are you gonna... Now, I wasn't supposed to be doing that. Remember, I was supposed to be nonviolent. And
Right.
just as he got close to me, I was thinking, maybe I'll catch the cane. He had to put the cane down to hold himself up. He couldn't walk without it.
Did she the trick?
Well, I walked past him, took off the sign, and walked off the picket line. That was my test. Am I really nonviolent? Was I really gonna let that man hit me?
Right.
But I was supposed to be trained that wasn't supposed to be going through my mind.
Right.
But I have to admit it was.
Right.
I was a human being.
Right.
It was going through my mind.
Right.
Am I really nonviolent? And am I going to let you hit?
There's a really cool picture, a beautiful picture. You know, as it be, there's a really cool picture of Dr. Middlebrooks online. If you just Google her name, Dr. Gwen Middlebrooks, in Google Images, there's a really cool picture of her wearing a sign. I guess you were outside of Riches?
I was outside of
Riches. Yeah, and
On
I
the
forget
west
what the sign
side.
said. It was like,
I think it says wear old clothes
Yeah.
with dignity, don't shop here, or
that's
something
exactly
like
what
that.
it said.
Something
Yeah,
like
we know, wear old clothes with new dignity.
Yeah.
Don't shop here. Yeah.
And the man
Yeah.
behind me is Otis Moss. He was,
Okay.
and we're dressed. He has on a full coat and a hat.
Right.
I have a purse with a tote bag because every time we picketed, we didn't know if we would be arrested.
Yeah.
So we always had a tote bag with toilet articles and things like that. And I
Right.
had on high heel shoes.
Right.
You would never see anybody picketing in tennis shoes. We
Right.
had to wear tennis shoes
Right.
and jeans because it was thought that if you dressed better, people treated you better.
Right.
They
Right.
wouldn't rough you up.
Right.
That was during the days, when jeans weren't considered decent attire.
Right.
Ruffians wore
Right.
those. You know, now they're the top of the line.
Right. No, that if you get a chance to Google her, that picture's really cool, and like I want it just in general.
Yeah, you would
It's
see
cool.
my face turn to the right, and I told him what I asked my students, my children and friends to look at in that picture are the white people who are standing against the wall in the background. The stores were closed, and they came to Atlanta, downtown Atlanta, that they brought their children,
Yeah.
and they were standing against the wall yelling at us, calling us the N-word and everything else they could think of, with their children standing there. One little girl has on glasses, and they're just looking, and it was interesting how they brought their children to see and listen to them verbally attack us.
Right.
And that is the most interesting thing on the picture to me, to look at the children and the people yelling at us.
Yeah. And while I have you both here, I know there's a story. I'll make it brief about you all's time meeting Malcolm X.
Oh yeah.
So you all together met Malcolm X, which I
Yes.
thought was a really interesting
And the
story.
only reason I got to go, Herschel, you have to understand, was brilliant. She had been an international exchange student, and our dormitory director loved Herschel.
Right.
And she spoke French fluently and still does.
Right.
And I heard, I don't know how I heard that Malcolm X was speaking over at Clark College. It was Clark College then. I heard this crazy man was over there talking about black supremacy and superiority of the black race. He must have been out of his mind.
Right.
So we wanted to go over there and have a talk with him. Can you believe that? So I got Miss McCoy. I said, please let me go. Please, if Herschel could go, Herschel would go with me. So she let the two of us go over, and we went over to this dormitory on Clark's campus. And you have to understand, he was staying in the dormitory because there were no nice hotels in Atlanta where he could stay.
Yeah.
So he came to speak at Clark, and he was staying. So he came down, and we had a talk with him. I'm telling you, I told him it was the most exciting experience of my life. He was very, very convincing of his position. Why share with what they have? Why want a part of what they have? Develop your own. You need to have black power, financial power. He was really a very powerful person. Very exciting experience to be in his presence. When he was killed, I understood, because there was something very magnetic about being around him and listening to him.
Yeah.
Not that Martin Luther King wasn't great,
Yeah.
but this man in his position had really thought out all of the different angles and what was better. And he said, why are you doing what you're doing? And it was just you should be trying to build up the black community and establishing your own power base, financially and politically.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of correctness in that, you know?
And you all essentially went to the dorm,
We went to the
told the dorm director that you wanted to speak to Malcolm X,
Yes.
and he came down and
He
just
came
kicked it.
down. Well, you know, he knew about us, so
Right.
he was excited to meet us too.
I'm sure.
And he knew we were
Right.
connected with Martin Luther King.
Right.
He had said he was on his way to Florida, and he said that you know, he was gonna come back through Atlanta, but then he sent a note. I'm still looking for that card. He sent me a postcard saying that his schedule had changed. He would not be returning to Atlanta, and we never saw him again. Probably
Right.
never remembered me. But that's how serious we were.
Right.
How dare you be in Atlanta talking about black supremacy?
And not come talk
And
to
we're
us.
talking about equality.
Right.
Well, you got to
right.
be wrong, man. We have
Right.
to talk with you.
Right.
I
Yeah.
just want to say something else about
Please.
Dr. Middlebrooks has mentioned that Ronnie King was the chair of the Atlanta Student Movement, and I
Yeah.
was the co-chair. And the three of us, Malcolm wanted to talk to us. And we walked up on a hill. It was when there were the picket lines, and you could stand on the hill and see, and it was raining. And blacks were walking in the rain. Some were in wheelchairs.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was so moved by this. Malcolm said to us, "How did you do it? How did you accomplish this?"
Right.
And so in many ways, I've always had respect for Malcolm because he was always trying to understand, trying to learn things that, because he was, born in Boston or someplace? I mean, he wasn't a Southerner.
Right.
But that was a very memorable experience.
Yeah. That's incredible. And so you all spent essentially an afternoon with him, right? Like, and just chatted with him.
Well,
Amazing.
we had other work to do, but I mean,
Amazing.
he called, he said, "I just want to understand how you did this,
Right.
how you accomplished it."
Right.
And the other thing I think is important to point out, many of the students at the Morehouse Spelman Clark College, Savannah University Center,
Yeah.
had parents who were teaching in the public school system.
Yeah.
It was very difficult for them to demonstrate. And so
Okay.
you tend to have more of the external students
Mm-hmm.
who were demonstrating because their parents, of course, their jobs were not at risk.
Right.
And so I think when Gwen was saying, we understood that.
Right.
I
It was a
tell you,
extraordinary experience.
right, when I was, we were always dissatisfied. I was living in Harbor Homes, and we would ride the bus, the Pryor Road bus to downtown Atlanta to transfer to our high school. And we would stand up on that bus while white people sat next to the window, lined up all the way back. They sit next to the window because
Yeah.
they didn't want to sit on the aisle seat because then they would be close to us who were standing. And they didn't want to be close to people like us. And the Village Apartments was the end of the line above Carver Homes. So by the time the bus got down to Carver Homes, the white people would have one to every seat. We didn't like it. And we were talking about it. But we had been taught not to touch them. My parents, I remember, teaching me if you walk down the street, you come face to face with a white person, even if it's a child, you've got to step out of the way.
It's crazy.
If you stay where you are and they run into you, you'll be charged with assault. So they told us things, but we didn't like it. If you're waiting to catch the bus and you're first in line and a white person comes up, you have to step back and let them get on the bus. Or, the bus driver will call your name, you might get in trouble. So we board the bus going to school. The bus driver would say, "You ends, get to the back of the bus.
Wow.
Get on back to the back of the bus. Get on back." No, we didn't like it. We wouldn't say anything because our parents had taught us how. But we were talking about what we were going to do about it. We were smart, remember? The law said we couldn't sit next to him, but it didn't say we couldn't put something in the seat next to him. We were talking about that for months. We talked about it. In fact, we were talking about it in Sunday school. And Daddy King heard us, and he said, "Now make sure you can put something in the seat next to him. You don't let it fall over on him because you'll be charged with assault." And our idea was to put our books. It was before the days of the book bags. We didn't have book bags. We didn't have cell phones. So we talked to each other in
I didn't know
groups
book
all
bags
the
were like a
time.
relatively.
Yeah, we didn't have book bags. We
Oh,
used
like
to-
the little straps.
Right. No,
The strap-
we
the
would
strap.
take a belt
Yeah.
and
Okay.
put it around our books to hold
Right.
our books, but we held our books in our arms.
Got it.
So I remember one day I was on the bus. I don't know the name of the person who started. I was toward the back of the bus because the the Negro boys would let the girls get on first. So we were toward the back of the bus. And somebody bumped me and gave me some books. And they weren't mine, so I bumped the next person, gave it to them. We piled them in the seat. The bus was going down Pryor Road, going north. And we pressed down on the books we had talked about. We were pressed on them to keep them from falling over. Then that person would get up and move up. And we would say, thank you. And as they would move to the front, we let some of the older Negroes who were on the bus, older than we were, sit down. And we did that all week. We didn't say a word. There was not a sound uttered. And I remember to the second, that Monday morning, when I boarded that bus, all those white people were seated double to the front. You can't imagine how that made me feel. We never said a word. We never looked at them. We never looked at them. Then we let all the people who were working older than we were sit down on the bus. And it stayed like that. So we were reaching a point where we were dissatisfied with the way we were being treated in Atlanta, and we were anxious to do something. My mother told me when I called her from jail, I knew you were in jail before I got the call. Because there was our conversation, and understand this, regardless as to the financial status of your parents, your families, we were all in the same boat.
Right.
It didn't matter. You know, I couldn't go to Richards and eat, and nobody else got nothing. When I went to Richards to eat, I said, that's what I was fighting for. You know, we were, and that was one of the things that solidified us as a cultural group.
Yeah.
It didn't matter how much money you had.
Right.
You still couldn't sit on the front of the bus.
Right.
I lived in Carver Homes. You might have been making $100,000 a year. You couldn't sit on the front of the bus, and I couldn't either. So we were all in the same boat. So that was a single thing. That was a bond.
Yeah.
And, you know, some people now think that now we can go to different places and the fight is over. It is not over. You know, racism is insidiously ingrained in the fabric of American society. And some people want to ignore it and say that it's not there. And my fear is that our young people can't recognize it because they don't have the history of slavery and segregation to make them understand, you know, this person is doing this to you. Do you know what this? My husband said, must you always be on the battlefield? Do you think he is? You know, and he says, I always look at things as black and white. And he might be right. But I said, well, I'm just trying to be analytical. You know, what is your point? What is this all about? But don't be a fool. You know, there are some jobs in Atlanta that people of color have never had.
Great.
Never had. And one of them is the executive director of the education department in Atlanta. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
I mean, this is insanity. And they have systematically started putting minorities called white women in those spots. And we, you know, what are you talking about? There's still a lot to be done. And it's serious, and we can't be foolish about it. But we have to always remember that when we help people who are considered the least of these, we help ourselves. Because I found out numbers really matter.
Right.
Numbers really matter. When you get together with people to do things, when those students came to help us sit in, it made a difference. The size of the group really made a difference.
Yeah.
It spoke volumes. It means we're together on this. And then it meant that the people in the schools couldn't put certain people out, because one of the things students need to understand is that the most important group in a school would be called students.
Right.
You know, most people think, oh, you get a president, now you can have a school. Not without the students. If the students walk out, you have no school.
Right.
You have to understand where the power lies. And that's one thing we learned, that there was power among the students, and that's one of the greatest feelings in the world, when you can move a mountain together with somebody. And that's what we did that day I walked on that bus. It was a really great feeling. And I had always wanted to do something. I couldn't do anything by myself.
Right.
Yelling out and fighting somebody of another race would have only put me in jail, but silently reshaped the behavior of those people in a very positive way.
Yeah.
You know, sit to the front. At least let us sit in the back.
Right.
What
Right.
can I say?
And my last question to you before I open it up for Q&A is, what would you say is your life's work?
Oh my goodness.
No, I asked you the same question, but I'm
Oh,
curious.
wow.
Because you've done so much. You've been a fighter. You've been an educator. Like what?
I think educating the total person in the classroom to me, you know, and making people have not more than a responsibility for self, but a responsibility for self through your work with other people. We can't live in this world alone. You know, I said to somebody, what would life be like if we had no one to collect our trash? What are we gonna do? What if nobody to maintain dumps? Nobody to pick up trash? I mean, I carry Coca-Colas to the man who collects my trash. Slip him a little beer every now and then. Yes, and one day I said, wait a minute, I got a cold beverage for you. I came back, he said, is this all you got? He didn't know I was going to bring him some Coca-Cola. So I went back and got him some beer. I said, please don't drink this while you drive. But I really appreciate them.
Yeah.
And when I don't get my trash can up there on time, they come down and get it.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Because I give them everything. They're doing a job I don't want to do. But that helps our health. That helps us live in a healthy environment.
Yeah.
And we got the nerve to not want to be around those people. But they do a very valuable job.
Right.
So we must work to support them.
Right.
The sanitation workers. You know, they're not our business. Yes, they are. Because they help us live healthy lives. And
Right.
we have to see beyond. When we do something for them, we do something for ourselves. So when we prepare people to work in society, we must prepare them to have a global perspective about their responsibility.
You are a teacher.
Yes.
You are a teacher. Thank you so much.
Is that the end?
No, yes. Of our direct conversation, yes. I mean, this. You've done so much, and again, I just want to give you another round of applause. Honestly, for being a fighter, and this space, if you look around the space, you'll see different things, you know, that are original pieces. Like there's something over there that says coloreds only, colored women only. That's the reason we host it in this space, because the space lends itself to these types of conversations. So thank you to WERD as well.
Let me tell you a story.
Okay.
My mother, remember I said I lived in Carter Homes, so that meant we didn't have a lot of money. I used to, a couple of times I remembered, I don't know what the occasion was, I've said to my mother, I just remember her response that we're so poor. We don't have anything. She said, yes you do. She said, you're not poor. Not expensive. She's got to be out of her mind.
Yeah.
We're poor. She said, you have so much. And one day I was at Ebenezer Baptist Church. And Daddy King was angry and fussing after a sermon that the black preachers in Atlanta had gotten together and fought with Easter Seal to get a camp established for handicapped children of color. And they had finally they had one for white people all the time. But during the summer, the children who were handicapped had nowhere to go. And they had gotten one at Mosley Park. And he was angry because he said these were children with multiple handicaps.
Right.
And they needed one volunteer for every child. And nobody came from the Negro community. You Negroes, he said, didn't support us, and we did this, that, and that. So that Monday morning, I took my babysitting money, got on the Pryor Road bus in Carver home, and rode to Mosley Park. And they assigned me to a little boy named John, who had so many multiple handicaps. He couldn't hold himself up in the chair. They had strapped him to the chair to keep him in the chair. Couldn't walk, couldn't talk. He made sounds and things. And so I had him. And I took him in the water before. I had to take off his clothes. He was about 6. Take him in the water to swim. He had never been in a swimming pool. Had to hold on to him. He was so excited. And after we went swimming, I put his clothes back on him, and I had to feed him. And so the lady gave me a big rubber spoon to feed him. And she said, you scoop the food up and put it in his mouth. And then you have to take your other hand and pull his lips together. Hold him around the spoon. You pull the spoon out of his mouth. Because he had such poor muscle coordination, he couldn't close his mouth. So he couldn't get nourishment. As he tried to chew, the food would fall out of his mouth. That day, I got on the 3 Urban Street bus. It was 3 West Hunter going one way and 3 Urban Street the other way. And I guess I was crying. The lady next to me said, look, girl, why you crying? You so unhappy. Things can't be that bad. I said, I'm not crying because I'm unhappy. I'm crying because I'm happy. I understood what my mother said. You may not have money, but God gave you so many things that you can use to help other people.
Yeah.
And I thought about him. I could close my mouth and chew my food. I could feed myself. I could put my clothes on. I could walk. I could talk. God had blessed me with so many gifts. And sometimes as individuals alone, we feel so helpless.
Yeah.
What can I do? But with what you have, what God has given you, you can do so many things. It was then I knew. I appreciated. I was grateful for everything I had that nothing money could buy. I will always remember, I worked with him all summer, changed my life.
Yeah.
I found out there were so many things I could do for others if I just gave of myself.
Yeah.
Get in the game. You know, you can do so much.
Yeah.
That little boy who doesn't even remember my name. And that day in church, I just decided I was going.
Yeah.
Take my babysitting money, ride the bus. I could help. I could help those children. And you can do so much, and sometimes we get so lost in self, we don't figure out the little things we can do that are so powerful. That are really so powerful.
Yeah.
You know, I thought about that one. So I tell people I lived in poverty, but I was not poor. I don't make no mistake. If you want to know what money can do to you, just look at Donald Trump.
Yeah.
You know, money can ruin you.
Yeah.
Money is not what you really need.
Right.
People are struggling, trying to get these jobs, making all this money and all this stuff. Money can be the worst thing that can happen to you.
Yeah.
It's got to be something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something
Thank you for
inside
that.
you.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So I want to open it up to the floor for a couple questions. We've learned a bunch of information, and I'll just kind of open. Does anybody have a question?